Good morning, all. It is 10:30, and I am so thankful that you have joined us today for our webinar about water flows downhill, how your yard can impact water quality and quantity with myself and Deirdre Irwin. Today, we have the third of our weekly webinar series that the district is hosting to help provide opportunities to educate our residents about the work that we do and how individuals can help to protect our water resources. This series will continue weekly through June, and the next webinar will be on May 21st, and it will be focused on stormwater, and the following webinar will be about springs, and Rob Matson will be our guest speaker for that one. The link to sign up for those is on our website, SJRWMD.com. Hope that you will join us for those future webinars. I would like to remind everyone that this is being recorded and that they will be on mute throughout the presentation. Feel free to type questions in as they come to you, and at the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. And if we do not get to your questions during the time of this webinar, we will reach out to you and get you an answer. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. And I'm excited for you all to hear about things that you can do within your landscape to help us protect our water resources. So if we think about our landscapes and think about the fact that most of our systems across Florida, or a large majority, would have looked something like this prior to our developments. And with an ever increasing population here in Florida, systems like this one that allow that water to slowly move down into the ground and those trees to take up that water from the ground, we start converting to systems like this, which have homes, driveways, roads, and landscaped areas that have a higher requirement for inputs like fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides to maintain their greenness. And over irrigation in these landscapes can transport those chemicals that we utilize on them to our local waterways. And so we are creating more runoff through our conversion. However, when we start thinking about our landscapes on a larger scale, and look at that community-wide change that there is occurring, we are able to see those stormwater systems that are permitted through the district as a way to help decrease those impacts of stormwater on our local waterways. But it is important to remember that these stormwater systems are designed to take that first bit of rainfall, and during periods of high rainfall, they are designed so that our local water bodies do receive those waters from our stormwater ponds. So how we choose to landscape and maintain those landscapes will have an impact on our receiving water bodies. So remember, we all live in a watershed. And so that means that we're always nearby a water body. So how we choose to landscape can have impacts on our local water bodies, whether those are rivers, lakes, springs, the wetlands nearby, and that there is also that connection between the amount of water we utilize to irrigate our yards and to maintain our yards. And runoff from our landscapes can be a source of pollution here in Florida. And remember, we all live in a watershed and we all live in fair proximity to a water body. For example, myself, I live in a neighborhood that has stormwater ponds in its vicinity and in my backyard. And those, during periods of high rain, would discharge to a nearby creek. And that creek, within 2 miles, would flow into the St. Johns River. An important reminder that the things that we do in my yard and in my neighborhood, the maintenance of those stormwater infrastructure, making sure that when we mow our grass, that we blow those grass clippings back into the yard and not into the street so they go down the storm drain, ensuring that we pick up our dog poop and throw it away rather than letting those nutrients and bacteria go into our stormwater bodies, as well as our fertilizer. We always want to make sure that we are fertilizing appropriately at the right time, and that we have done soil tests to know what our yard needs in order for those plants to grow. And ultimately, that is the connection between our water quality and our water quantity. So when we think about that connection, irrigation is ultimately how a lot of those nutrients and that extra water can be moved. So we utilize irrigation in a lot of our homes and in newer developments especially, and that irrigation can be a source of waste if water is not being applied to the landscape as needed. And if it's trying to water the sidewalks or the roads, which creates that runoff that goes into our stormwater systems. Again, nutrients are what are causing the greatest amount of impairment or those algal blooms in our water bodies here in Florida. And so those same nutrients that we might put on our yard for helping plants to grow can cause algae to grow once it makes its way into our water bodies. So it is important that our irrigation be designed appropriately and applied appropriately. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Deirdre. And Deirdre, I appreciate you and all your irrigation expertise participating today to let people know how they can examine their irrigation system and maybe even retrofit it.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm happy to be here again this week, and I look forward to hearing any questions that may come along that folks can enter into the question box. So let's talk a little about how to have an irrigation system that does not waste water or result in water pollution. This is possible, and there are three main components for success. The system should be designed and installed for efficiency, a little more on that later. The system should be scheduled according to the irrigation restrictions and include appropriate run times for each zone and have a functioning rain sensor. And then finally, the system should have frequent maintenance done to maintain this efficiency and to keep the system running well and saving water. Very few of us can say yes to all three of these components, but with some intervention and retrofit, we can all get close to this standard in our irrigation system. Okay, next slide, Jennifer. So many of you have in-ground irrigation systems, so let's take a closer look at the basic system. All irrigation systems comprise of these components. In Florida, they will also have a rain shutoff device. First of all, the water main. It brings water to the irrigation system, coming either from a utility or a well. Next, the source, in other words, the point of connection. If it's a utility, the meter will be located at this point so the utility can measure how much water you use. Then the automatic controller, which is commonly called the brains of the system, is either located in your garage or on the side of your home. In Florida, most counties will require a backflow preventer to stop any water for irrigation mixing with water inside your house. The valves are the next part, and they are usually in a box in the ground near the controller. There's a lid on the box, and I urge you, if you do decide to explore, to be careful when you open that, as both spiders and snakes like to hang out in the valve box. And the valves communicate with the controller, and they turn it on or off depending on what the controller tells it to do. You can also manually turn on your zone from the valve. Finally, the sprinkler head. It's the device that actually applies the water to the landscape. A network of carefully sized pipes brings water to these sprinkler heads. Okay, let's move on a little and look at the minimum design standards for a system. If your system is lacking, there are options we'll get to where you can retrofit for efficiency, and we'll discuss that later on. So first of all, really important, separate zones for turf and beds. It's really just common sense, as turf usually needs longer watering time than the landscape beds. Over time, it may be possible to reduce irrigation to the beds or even turn it off. Secondly, sprays and rotors should not be in the same zone. Spray heads, like the one in the lower left of your screen, they are the ones that have a stationary constant flow. And they apply water much faster than rotors, the next picture over, which move in how they apply water. Next, these sprinklers should have head-to-head spacing. Manufacturers design the heads to be spaced so that water from one head touches the next head, assuring an even coverage. This is frequently ignored by installers, resulting in uneven coverage, which is a big issue when you're watering turf. Pressure is another important requirement for efficient irrigation. Both high and low pressure can be problematic for your irrigation system. High pressure causing misting or water loss to the atmosphere, and low pressure reduces the coverage of water. High pressure can be due to maybe undersized pipes, or sometimes it's just high pressure coming from the utility. Pressure regulated heads are an excellent way to reduce high pressure, but you may need to hire a professional to help you diagnose the source of your pressure issue. So you can see there's a lot to consider and designing for maximum efficiency. Just to let you know, a lot of our local governments in our district have passed codes in recent years that require the systems to be designed to meet these basic requirements. So now we're going to get a little bit more technical and talk about distribution uniformity, or DU as it's called in the industry. It basically means putting water out evenly over the surface of the turf grass so that the root zone gets enough water for even growth. This graphic helps us understand the impact of poor application. So the first picture on top, you can see where water is being put out evenly, and to get 1 inch of water, you put out about 1.4 inches. And that's because no irrigation system is perfect. You have to apply a little more to get the exact right amount to the root zone. Remember that we only want to water that root zone, so applying that water evenly for the right length can save thousands of gallons. In the lower picture, you can see where there's poor coverage, and usually people end up watering to the drier area, and they over apply and water goes beneath the root zone in the wet areas. And you can literally double the amount of water needed when you have poor coverage or poor distribution uniformity. And following up on the right head for the right zone, sprays and rotors have drastically different application rates. Sprays routinely apply water twice or three times more water than does the rotor in the same amount of time. When the two types are installed in the same zone, it's virtually impossible to distribute a balanced amount of water across the area. This graphic will show you what happens when we mix heads. So say our goal is to apply a ½ inch of water, and we have rotors and sprays in the same zone. So we turn on the system, we turn on the zone, and we set it for maybe about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you have a ½ inch applied for the spray section. But you have to keep applying water so that the rotor will put out a ½ inch. And this continues on for 45 minutes. So it took 45 minutes for the rotor section to apply the same amount of water. And now look what happens in the spray area. Way more water is applied than is needed. So that's kind of a graphic representation of what happens when you have rotors and sprays in the same zone. So a few more considerations for efficiency for the overachievers in the audience. The sprinkler heads need to rise above the turf grass. That sounds like common sense, but with St. Augustine turf, which accumulates thatch over time, your sprinkler head over time seems to sink lower. So it's important to have maybe a 6-inch head is recommended for both Bahia or St. Augustine. The heads need to be adjusted to only irrigate plants. Again, common sense. Jennifer mentioned this, so that we're not irrigating the sidewalk or the road or the mulch areas. And then getting super precise is the concept of match precipitation. When you have a rotor zone, they oftentimes have the exact same nozzle in the rotor for applying water. And this only applies to rotors. Sprays come with the right size nozzle. That means if your rotors are applying water to a quarter, a half, or a full circle with the same nozzle, water is coming out very unevenly. So this is a little more complex, but if you do nothing else but ask your irrigation company to please have matched nozzling in your rotors to represent the area they spray, it's a very cheap and great way to apply water more evenly. Micro irrigation in beds is another consideration or addition to your system. Uses significantly less water and it is applied directly to the root zone. And moving on to controllers. Automatic controllers have made irrigation so much easier, but there's a downside to that due to the convenience we often overwater. Paying attention to your controller settings is the cheapest and easiest way to curb your water use. You should check your controller to make sure it's set the correct days per the watering restrictions. It's set to run for the right amount of time, maybe 20 minutes for sprays, 40 or 50 minutes for rotors. Make sure there's no additional programs running. Sometimes these controllers have program A, program B, and frequently they each have a runtime, so basically your irrigation twice. I just heard this morning from a local government employee about a system in their area where the person was running the system for 16 hours of the day because they had multiple programs. And you need to check also that your rain sensor is actually wired into the controller. Again, that sounds like common sense, but it's a mistake that gets made frequently. So talking about these shut-off devices, Florida statutes require that all irrigation systems have a functioning rain sensor, and that shuts off the controller if it's raining or has just rained. In addition to rain sensors, you might want to check out the new Wi-Fi controllers, so you can control your controller from an app on your phone. Also, there's a number of smart controllers in the market, and they use either soil moisture or weather-based data to control the system. And they are a lot more sophisticated than a traditional controller. They provide better options and increase the likelihood of savings. These tools can all be used within the watering restrictions, and there are rebates available at your utility to help you upgrade your system. So then the next step is deciding how long you should run each zone, and it really is dependent on a number of factors. This chart from our website is only a guideline. It depends on your yard, but it's a good starting point. Micro irrigation and rotary nozzles irrigate more slowly, and they may need up to an hour. But remember, the irrigation rule only allows you to do an hour per zone if necessary. Remember also, during our dormant season in the winter, to cut back your watering. There really is no need to water dormant grass. And even you can skip every other week or turn it off completely, depending on your comfort level. Consider using the tuna can survey to see how much water your zone is currently putting out. And we have a video on the website that shows you how to do that, and it has a worksheet to help you calculate the amount of water being put out in your zones. But also, again, your utility may offer this as a free service. Okay, if you have noticed that you will have issues with your system and you need to do some tweaking yourself, or you need to instruct an irrigation company to help you make it more efficient, there's a few options, kind of basic approaches. You can either alter the shape and the location of beds to match what you do have for irrigation zones, if it's still aesthetically pleasing and makes sense. Sometimes this can be a very expensive option. You could alter the irrigation zones to match the actual landscape you have in the ground. It's likely a bit cheaper and it will look better. For neither of these work, kind of a hybrid is to maximize your head spacing for your turf areas and maybe cap some heads in your beds. So you're improving efficiency in the turf and you're reducing the water in your beds. You could also look at retrofitting the zones that cover your beds or most of your bed areas with a micro irrigation retrofit kit, which is available in most big box stores. Also look at changing maybe all your heads to one type, which would be maybe rotary nozzles, which are a more efficient spray head that is pressure regulated and matched. And it reduces runoff because it applies the water more slowly. The picture in the middle is a rotary nozzle. So moving on then to just a little bit of information about what's happening in our district. Many of our residential and commercial builders, they utilize a number of green building programs to install and certify more sustainable landscapes and irrigation systems. Programs like the Florida Green Building Coalition, Florida Friendly Landscaping, and our own Florida Water Store program have similar approaches to landscape design, site-appropriate plants, reduced runoff, and increased shade, of course, for irrigation systems so that they are efficient. Several local governments have become Florida Green Building Coalition certified local gov so they can promote these strategies. And then finally, let's take a quick look at how we actually landscape. I know I've talked primarily about irrigation, but it really is, no matter what kind of landscape you have, if the irrigation system is inefficient, you're going to have problems both with over-application and runoff. So choose site-appropriate plant choices that are suitable for your area, including native species, and right there you'll water less. Reduce areas of irrigated turf grass, so you have less water and less need for chemicals like fertilizer. If possible, preserve areas of natural vegetation. I know that's not an option for all of us, and that means that we have established natives, so you have less water and less fertilizer. And then increase shade, areas of shade, to allow for less watering of the turf grass. So let me wrap up here and pass you back to Jennifer, who will talk a little more about reclaimed water and its impact on application and irrigation systems. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Deirdre, for all that wonderful information. Hopefully everybody is now excited about converting their irrigation systems. If you remember, or if you participated in previous webinars, half of our water use in our homes is actually utilized outside. And so please plan on helping to join us in celebrating Reclaimed Water Week next week, in which we're always thankful for all of the work that is being done in getting reclaimed water, that treated wastewater that is a fabulous source of water for irrigation, is a great way to be a beneficial reuse of that water. The district is currently working with our utilities in our district to increase the amount of reclaimed water that is utilized. You can see in this graphic from 2018 that in that central Florida CFWI region, that middle portion of our district, that there is a great amount of efficiency of that reclaimed water being utilized for beneficial purposes. The district in the past 16 years has contributed more than $72 million. And through these partnerships, we have made available 217.5 million gallons of reuse water a day for irrigation. While it is really a wonderful way to supplement or to provide alternative water supply, especially for irrigation, it is really important to remember that that reclaimed water does contain nutrients. And those nutrients can be beneficial to our grass and are beneficial to our grass. We even can dial back how much we fertilize. But when those same nutrients from our reclaimed make their way into our water bodies, they can have those negative impacts of causing algal problems. So if we think about some of those reuse considerations, it is again important that even though we may be using reclaimed or that reuse water, that we are not designing our systems so that the water is being directly sprayed into a stormwater pond. This was a really expensive way to take that reclaimed water and not discharge it directly to a water body, but then it still is going directly to a water body. We also want to make sure that we are applying that water in a way that is directly to the grass so that the grass is able to take it up, and not over watering, creating that runoff as in that top picture. So that overspray or over application can cause that additional water that goes directly into our stormwater ponds. And remember, all of our waters are connected. And so in areas where we would have a stormwater pond that would receive that water, you want to try and have a fertilizer-free buffer. And when you're using reclaimed, that water has nutrients in it. So those are important. And again, thinking back to fertilizer and pesticide management, depending on if you're a do-it-yourselfer or if you hire a company, if you do it yourself, you always want to make sure that you have read labels, that you understand what those labels say. And there's a lot of really great information on the Florida Friendly Landscaping website. They have a lot of really helpful tools to understand how much your yard needs for fertilizer, how you apply it. And you also really want to make sure that you do not apply it ahead of a large rain event, because in that case, then you're going to lose a lot of that fertilizer directly to our water bodies. If you do hire companies to apply fertilizer or pesticides, herbicides in your yards, you want to make sure that you have talked to them about their green industry best management practice certification. It is a requirement that fertilizers have this applicator's license. And in some of our local governments, some of our counties, they actually will have a decal on their trucks that lets you know that they are certified. But each individual applicator needs to have that training, and it does allow them to have training on an annual basis so that they understand the importance of managing those fertilizers. You also, if you live on a stormwater pond, maybe you're able to help your community to establish a buffer like the one in the picture here. And again, anytime you can have additional plants before that surface water, those plants take up that nutrients and they convert it to something that's going to be able to be more, stay in place more than head out to our local waters. There are tons of great tools if you are excited about trying to either look at new landscapes in your neighborhood or in your yard, maybe converting areas. The Florida Friendly Landscaping has a great database of plants. We have a plant database as well, the Florida Native Plant Society. There's no shortage of lists of what plants would work in your area. And again, it is really important that you look at where you are, what kind of soils you have. You may even want to take a soil test and get that analyzed so you know if your soils are acidic or basic, some of those general characteristics that will help determine if a plant's going to survive. There is, again, that Florida Friendly Best Management Practices of the Green Industry Certification. Those resources are online. And then if you have an irrigation system and you're trying to figure out what type of maintenance or how to go in and really get into your controller, check out our website. We have some really great videos that walk you through that and talk about the importance of it. And we also have a at-home water use survey, so you can get in there and really get that understanding of how much water you're using inside and outside, and find where is it that you can decrease your usage. So there are tons of resources available, and I hope that you will look to some of those resources. Finally, I would like to thank you all for your attention today. Remind you of our Water Less campaign, because remember, anytime that we are able to decrease how much water we're putting on our landscapes, the less likely it is that we will overwater or create any of that runoff. And I am happy to get any questions that you may have about what you can do in your landscape. Also, if you have things that you have done in your yard that you're really proud of, please type those in and I'll share them with the group so that we know that we're all committed and all making changes. And the last thing I would like to do is have a poll of, based on what you've heard today, what new landscaping behavior are you able to implement? Are you able to manually control your irrigation timer? Are you going to talk to your landscaper about their certification? Or maybe adjust your irrigation timer seasonally, thinking about skipping a week in the winter, those kind of things. So let's see what people are interested in doing. And again, please enter your questions if you have any. Oh, great. We do have one. It was a question about what are utilities doing to help their residents to be more efficient? Deirdre, would you be able to help us with that one?
Sure. And I see the results of the poll there. That's great. Seasonally adjusting your timer is a great step to reducing your use. I hope everyone can hear me. I only saw now there's some comments that my sound was not loud enough. So I've turned it up and I'm going to speak more loudly. Hopefully I won't deafen you. So our utilities in the St. John's district, particularly in Central Florida in CFWI, have a range of very successful programs. We collaborate a lot with them. We have a water conservation working group, and we meet quarterly and talk about best ways to implement conservation. According to them, their most successful program are their evaluation or audit programs, where their staff go to your house, look at your system, and advise you on what to do. And the number one place they say that they help is by helping the homeowner with their controller, how to reset it correctly. They sometimes have a rebate where they will actually give you money to change to micro irrigation, to add a smart controller, to put in rotary nozzles. They're all really popular ways you can work with your utility. And we provide funding. We have a cost share funding program every spring where we seek applications from utilities to implement these kinds of programs, because they are not free. It does cost them money. And our program pays up to 50% of that cost share for conservation.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate everyone attending today. If there are any of those questions that I did not get an opportunity to get to, I will address those to you. I just want to make sure we stay on time. Again, Deirdre, I appreciate your speaking with us today, and I look forward to all of these great changes that we're going to be able to make in our landscapes. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jennifer. Bye, everybody.